All right. Let's do it, Coach Dan.
All right.
All right, guys, we're doing our second mat chat, and this is with Coach Dan McCool. Coach Dan has lost how many pounds?
54.
54 pounds since he started a little over a year ago. His whole family's here every day. The girls are training, and he has setting a record this week. So we just expanded the schedule, and now we offer 9 adult classes a week. And Coach Dan will be the first and probably only student ever to take all 9 classes. That's pretty incredible.
I'm sure somebody will.
We'll see.
Will strive to beat me. So
right now you're doing it.
I'm doing it.
But Coach Dan, the floor is yours. What are we talking about?
Well, I wanted to talk about your new book, Hero.
Okay.
All right. It's your recent one. Just came out. Last week? Week before?
Yep.
Yeah. Before we get into the book, as far as like writing goes, how did you get into writing?
How did I get into writing? I had an email that I used to send out to my friends where I started reading when I was like 22, and I just had all these ideas and I needed someone to talk to. So I would just email like Trevor and like my 5 friends that would listen to what I had to say, and that email list slowly grew where then their friends wanted to be on it. And then all of a sudden there was like 150, 200 people who were just reading these random emails. Mm-hmm. And then my one buddy was like, you should start a blog. So me and my 2 really good friends started a blog together. And then that same buddy who I did the blog with was like, you should write a book. I was like, what am I going to talk about? He's like, write a jiu-jitsu book. Right. And I remember we were having a football catch. It was during halftime of a game, like, 7 years ago. And it was on a Sunday. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll write a book. And then from Monday through Friday, I just wrote all week. And by Friday, I'd written the book. And that was the first My Mastery one.
Oh, okay.
So writing has been a means of thinking for me.
Okay. Do you find it difficult to get inspired?
No.
To come up with ideas?
Life is awesome.
Life is awesome.
There's plenty of inspiration. I think it's just a matter of paying attention to the things you find meaningful and then like pursuing those routes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to writing, you compare jiu-jitsu to life a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any maybe future book that's going to be just completely about one or the other? So is it going to be just all about life and the way that you see it through maybe a different vehicle, as you always say,
mm-hmm.
or a straight like jiu-jitsu, maybe an instructional book or something like that?
My goal is to write about things that are not jiu-jitsu related because there's only so many people that do jiu-jitsu. And all these things we learn through jiu-jitsu are transdisciplinary and apply everywhere. Just like all the things we learn and all the books we read are transdisciplinary. So when I write about jiu-jitsu, it has a very limited audience. And I think these things are worth talking about in different ways so that everyone can hear them. Mm-hmm. So my goal would be that I write books that are not jiu-jitsu related. But right now, this is what I know best. But if you kind of look at the books over like the arc, they're going from hyper-specific to jiu-jitsu. So this one has very little to do with jiu-jitsu.
Right. And I noticed that because I have read 5 Rules for White Belts, 12 Rules for Jiu-Jitsu, and then Hero. I did read On Jiu-Jitsu as well. I did notice as you go on and on, it's less about jiu-jitsu and it is more about life and your philosophy and your love
that's
for.
Because I don't think we need. YouTube has it covered.
Mm-hmm.
Between you guys coming in every day, taking 9 classes, and then going on YouTube and seeing all the instructionals, we don't need any more instructional books.
Right.
They're out there. I think we need to know what jiu-jitsu is in the context of our lives.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, change gears a little bit. Name the book Hero.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your hero? So let's actually break that down. Let's go a real life hero, so like a real person that has actually touched your life, that you've actually met, someone you know.
Okay.
Versus your fictional hero.
Oh, bro, that's a great question. I will be perfectly honest, because I've studied so much like mythology and religion, and I've come to view everyone as the hero. And like you hear that you're the hero of your own story, but I genuinely believe that and feel that. Like when I look at like what you've done in the last year and how you've changed your life, like, that's a heroic act. When the 4-year-old kid comes in and they are just running away from their partner, not doing randori, and you slowly hone them in and they start confronting difficulty. Like that's a heroic act. And I think the thing I've learned from Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung is just that all of our experiences are so similar in so many ways. Being a subjective creature, confronting chaos, doing your best, like, as Jordan Peterson would say, to create habitable order out of chaos and keep aiming up. We all do that. Like every time someone walks in this door, like they're a hero to me. That's what we do is hard. And I think there's a good quote. It's like, easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life.
Mm.
And that our culture doesn't really create a lot of purposeful struggle. So you have to seek it out. And it's very easy not to. It's very easy to go home, watch Netflix, eat pizza, hang out. And that's what a lot of people choose. So anyone who doesn't choose, say, the common mode of comfort, I think you're a hero. You know, and then like little things like the single parent that comes in and finds a way to pay the tuition so their child can do jiu-jitsu, and I know it's difficult for them. Like, that's a heroic act.
Sure.
So I think everyone is a hero if we just open our eyes and quell our ego and look at them clearly. Specifically, I mean, Professor Almeida was a huge influence on me. Professor Almeida and Dr. August Lemming, who did the meditation class here, I met both of them at 22 years old. And it was like, here's the master of the mind, here's the master of the art. And I just had both those guys in my ears for like 8 years, you know. What an incredible gift.
Right.
And I think they were the real life greatest influencers that opened up this world for me. Dr. Lemming gave me Way of the Peaceful Warrior when I started there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, oh, there's something in these books that I never read in high school. I should probably start reading. And then I just read like a book a day for years. And then Professor Almeida introduced me to jiu-jitsu. And it was like, oh, this is it. This is the problem I want to try to solve. I'm just going to do jiu-jitsu every day, 7 days a week, multiple times a day. And so they were like my heroes. But I believe everyone is a hero. And I think that's our job as teachers, is to always remember that when we're on the mat, we're the least important person. We are the guide to help facilitate the hero's development, whether it's a 4-year-old kid that's, you know, going to grow up and affect the world in either a positive or negative way, or it's the 40-something dad that wants to come in and change his life. You know, they're all heroes, and we're just here to facilitate their development.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who would your, say, fictional hero be?
Fictional hero, like a literature figure?
Could be anything.
Oh. I mean, St. George confronting the dragon, that's like the... I love the dragon and knight imagery. You know, that's what the whole book's about. That's why it's on the cover. In Siddhartha, which a lot of our coaches are reading now, Siddhartha becomes the ferryman, and his job is to guide people from one shore to another. And I really much like that idea. I think, for me, I'm an inherently selfish person, and I think we all are, just we're subjective creatures. But I think more so me, more than most people maybe. And from 20 to, say, 30, all I did was focus on myself and jiu-jitsu. And now, as I'm in the 30 part of my life, from 30 to 40, I really understand the value of being a servant and that idea of being a ferryman, and you're here for other people to guide them in their own development. Especially in jiu-jitsu, you know, I can relate to not being able to currently do it with 2 torn pecs, but still being able to use it to serve other people. So the ferryman from Siddhartha is a big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's always, when you're, you know, taking instruction from somebody and you have somebody that's changing your life or helping guide you along the, you know, the corrected path that you want to take, it's nice to get their, you know, their perception of who do they look up to.
All right, can I give you another one?
Sure.
You know Ernest Shackleton?
Her.
All right, so
Yes.
Endurance. Yeah. So he was basically this Antarctic explorer who experienced, like, other than concentration camps and those horrible things, like the greatest hell that anyone's experienced on Earth, basically. I think it ended up being like 18 months. He and his crew of like 26, 27 guys were alone in the Antarctic trying to survive. You know, their ship got stuck in the ice very early on. So they're on like little fishing boats and like pulling these fishing boats for miles looking for water just to find their way home. And to hear the suffering that they endured and that they didn't lose anybody. And I think that stems from his ability to lead. The coolest part is he put out an ad in the paper when he was looking for people for his journey. And it was basically like, hey, you're probably going to die. You know, this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. But if we survive, people will know who you are. You will have done a good thing. You know, fame will wait for you, that kind of thing. And he interviewed everybody. So he was somehow able to decipher who was a good fit and who wasn't. That through this 18 or so month arduous journey, everyone could survive together. So that leadership and just that in the final part of that, right after being stuck at ice in the sea forever, they made a climb over a mountain that climbers today won't do. And it was him and 2 dudes with a pickaxe and 50 feet of rope after starving for 18 months in the freezing Antarctic. And they made that climb. And that he was the one who did it. You know, like he led from the front.
Right.
I like that idea.
That was pretty heroic.
Yeah.
So, So in the book, you also talk about things called your must.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah. So Tony Robbins has a lot of witty aphorisms, and one of his is, what are your musts versus your shoulds? It's all about what is your standard, because you meet your must. We very rarely meet our should, you know. I was talking today, I woke up and I felt like garbage because we had a rehearsal dinner last night, and I ate all the food, and it was incredible. And my must is that I'm in control of my physiology. I'm the one who's in charge and should feel good. And I didn't feel good. So I went to the gym. I did really hard work on the elliptical, saunaed, freezing cold ice shower, because my must is I should be a good servant for the people that walk in the store in half an hour. And if I'm not ready and primed to serve them, I'm not doing my job. So for me, my musts are, you know, what are my health goals each week? How many times do I go to the gym? How many runs? What are my reading goals this week? Like, I must read every day. How many pages?
Okay.
I must spend quality time with Amber, you know, and I must be the servant that our heroes deserve. So whatever I need to do to put myself in that position, you know, you have to do.
All right. So, changing gears completely, let's get to jiu-jitsu again. How would you describe your ideal student?
Oh,
If you could mold one person, take someone from scratch and make them.
they would have to start from scratch.
Yes.
That's a big part. Most students I've encountered that have prior training experience have developed a schema that's, we'll call it inefficient, and they're not receptive to learning, I guess, the way that I would want to teach, which in my mind would be, you know, let's cultivate the most amount of skill in the most efficient way, building the widest potential base so that you have the highest potential peak for your skill development. And it's hard with people who've already learned, because you have to unlearn some habits and some people can't. So you would start from a clean slate. You would have to be open. So in the Big Five model of academic psychology, one of those parts of the personality is openness, receptive to new ideas. And it's correlated completely to intelligence. But you need to be open. And I think the second part of that would be you need to be humble. Because the only way you're going to get good at this is just failing. You have to fail for like 10 years. And then if you just fail every day, eventually you get good. But that's not everybody. And our culture doesn't value failure. You're shunned for failing. You're encouraged not to fail. And that's like completely antithetical to the development of the individual. So I think you need someone who has a clean slate, who's open to new ideas, who has a growth mindset, and they're willing to fail, and someone who just shows up and puts the work in. Malcolm Gladwell wrote, you know, all these books about mastery and the 10,000 hour rule. And I think the biggest takeaway is you're not going to do 10,000 hours in anything you don't love, you know, and you're not going to acquire 10,000 hours if you're not willing to work really hard. So I would want a student that's willing to put in those 10,000 hours along their own continuum, how it works in their life. You taking 9 classes a day might get those 10,000 hours and call it, you know, 8 years.
Right.
Someone else might do it in 25 years. But someone who is open to new ideas, someone who's going to work hard, who's humble, and ideally a clean slate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's have some fun with the question.
What do you got?
Let's reference the movie Fight Club.
Okay.
You in your prime shape,
Uh-huh.
all right? You could roll with anybody. You could have a chance to pick anybody in the entire world that you could roll with and learn with for an hour. Who would you choose?
The first name that popped in my head is Rickson Gracie, I guess, just because he's so legendary. You know, you hear all these crazy stories about him, and he did so much for the sport. But I kind of got to do that, you know? Like, my teammates throughout the years, like, I got to train with Professor Almeida every day, and I got to train with Frankie Edgar, like, 4 times a week. Like, I got to do that, and a lot of my teammates who are now the biggest names in jiu-jitsu, like Gordon Ryan, Gary Tonin, like, I train with those guys every morning. So most people would answer that question with people who were my teammates, you know, that I don't get to train with right now because they're in New York City training every day. But I guess it would be, I wouldn't really change anything. It would be, I wish I could go back to say 5 years ago. And when it was just, all right, I'm going to train 3 times a day, or, you know, like 6 total hours, and love every second of it. I wish I could know that I wasn't going to do that forever. Because you don't know it when you're in it, you know. And now at 32, and now I'm in rehab mode, and I'm just started drilling with Coach Amber this week, you know, and I'm on that arc back.
Right.
And I'll never train the way I used to. And you kind of always think you will. So I wish I had known that at the time, to just savor that experience, that my body can do anything I want it to right now without thinking about it for as long as I want. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize how great that is until you can't do it anymore, you know.
which is one of the biggest things in life with a lot of things we take for granted sometimes. Not saying you did, but we don't necessarily live for the moment all the time because we always think there's tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then,
bro, and that's the biggest trap. Like, what greater schema is going to rob you of the day than looking ahead of today? You know, and I think that's why jiu-jitsu is so great. Like, meditation is an incredibly valuable tool. Meditation primes you to be present, to quell that thinking mind that is always like vying for the light and trying to tell you how important it is, and it brings you in touch with what's happening. And jiu-jitsu is our form of meditation. I mean, most people will not sit down and concentrate on one thing for an hour, but you guys do that every night when you train.
right.
That's incredible. You're doing that. You're not thinking about the mortgage or work or what's going on at home with your kids or your wife. You're concentrating on not getting strangled.
Yes.
And nothing hones you into the present moment more than that, you know?
And the funny thing is when you leave here, you're thinking of, how did I let that happen? Why did that happen?
Yeah.
And when you're sick and you can't make it to class, you're sitting there with your foot going 1,000 miles an hour because you want to be at class. You're thinking, all right, what are they doing tonight? I want to do that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that jiu-jitsu is like. You said earlier in our conversation that jiu-jitsu takes over your life.
Yeah.
But at least it's something positive.
Bro, that's it. You're going to be a slave to something. Like that's the Nietzschean idea that if you're going to become a master, you have to funnel yourself into one discipline and do it for a long time. But even if you're not trying to become a master, you'll become a slave to comfort. You know, and this is worth becoming a slave to. And I think it's worth becoming a slave to if you take what you learn on the mat and you apply it everywhere else.
Okay.
If you only ever kept this in a vacuum and never let it, you know, permeate into the rest of your life, I feel like you missed the greatest opportunity that this presents, because it's self-defense, but realistically, most of our students are never going to use these tools in that setting where they're actually defending themselves for their lives. You know, they're ready to, and, you know, maybe one or two will, but most of our students won't. But they're learning how to defend themselves from their self, from their bad habits, from comfort. And I think that's the greatest value.
Well, I mean, yeah, true. I mean, that's the one thing, like, because when we were deciding on what's, you know, martial art to get our daughters into, you know, obviously every father, every parent wants their children to learn how to defend themselves, especially in today's age with all the bullying and, you know, stuff like that. So, but I could have just chosen to take my girls to a school where they learn how to kick somebody, learn how to punch somebody, and they're a black belt in, 3 years?
Yeah.
Because you paid, you know, for the belt.
Yeah.
But what I found with jiu-jitsu is that, you know, there is this slow progression, but there is progression. They're learning, they're loving it. I mean, they've made so many friends since starting jiu-jitsu here. I mean, kids that they didn't even know a year ago are now having sleepovers and going to birthday parties. And I mean, it's been a whole new world for all of us.
Yeah.
But you also learn how to deal with life in a different way. You have a different perspective on things. The things that would take you from 0 to 10.
Bro,
take you
because you're suffering so much here, like everything else is just calm down. It doesn't matter. When your boss comes to you and he's yelling at you about something, it doesn't compare to being mounted by a 300-pound guy and you're exhausted.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
The other thing, when we had Professor Bongiorno come, and he told the story of you could be at jiu-jitsu for an hour and a half, getting choked, getting, you know, submitted, and you're happy for the person doing it for you.
Yeah.
But then as soon as you leave, the person going 5 miles an hour slower in front of you on 130, you're freaking out about.
It's funny how it works out that way.
And that whole scenario that he painted, that picture he painted, is just, that makes so much sense.
And that's a great point. To the idea that you are the hero, right? Another Tony Robbins thing is that problems are gifts if you learn from them. And if you develop that extreme ownership where every single experience can be a vehicle through which you modulate your inner experience, that everything can serve you if you let it. That, when you're driving home after that great time on the mat and celebrating your friend who whooped you, when you get stuck behind that guy going real slow, that's a chance to practice patience. It's a gift. And I think it's having the sincerity to hold yourself to that standard, that I must use everything that happens to me as a gift and see it as a blessing. Because when you do, like, your entire life turns around. The worse the thing is, the better the opportunity. Like, tearing both my pecs was the worst thing that ever happened to me, which means I've had a pretty good life, you know. But being stuck in slings for close to 4 months taught me so much about patience and self-acceptance in a way I never would have learned. So this horrible thing that I experienced, which was my fault from the choices I made, proved to be one of the most beneficial things I've ever experienced.
Okay. So let's say one last question.
Please.
Before we close it out. If you could go back and change anything, where would you start? What do you think it would be?
If I could change anything, I would have started jiu-jitsu sooner.
Okay.
That's a big one. I would have started reading sooner. I remember I had this realization maybe like a year ago where I was like, I'm not going to get to read all the books I want to read. And I was like actually frightened and upset about it.
Oh, wow.
You know, yeah, I remember when that hit me. So I would have started reading earlier. I read great books. Right now I'm doing the Carl Jung phase where that's really all I'm studying. After him, I'll probably go back to Aldous Huxley. So I'm reading the right stuff for me. But I would have started reading sooner. I would have started jiu-jitsu sooner. And I would have been much more kind to myself through this whole process of jiu-jitsu. I think I always held myself to a pretty high standard, but it wasn't completely out of love. If I'm really honest with myself, it was operating from a sense of like, I'm not enough as I am. And if I get better at jiu-jitsu, if I get a little bit stronger, if my 40 time goes down, I'll be more worthy of being. And that's a great way to achieve things, but it's not sustainable. It burns you out. And you were talking about being present. I mean, I want to be present in a place of love, not present in a place of shame.
Right.
So I think that's what I would have started. How about you?
Definitely would have started jiu-jitsu earlier.
Yeah.
Starting at 40, I would have definitely tried to start it, early in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of life choices that I would have changed. I probably would have changed my entire from 30 to 39.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking I could still party like I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And just time I lost, just making poor choices.
Okay.
So I definitely would have rather spent those 10 years living like I've lived the last year.
So in the last year, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen in your life outside of jiu-jitsu from your experiences in jiu-jitsu?
Good question. I'd say the biggest changes is just everything. I mean, it just seemed like I kind of like unzipped myself, stepped out as another person. Just left the clothes on the floor. Just
left 50 pounds on the floor.
I do, but just my whole mindset's changed. I mean, I'm eating healthier. I have more patience, like we talked about. Patience is a huge thing, especially working in corrections.
And then coming home to your two girls, how old are they now?
Well, Kaylee's just short of 10, and Riley's 13. So
that'll teach you patience.
Yes, but jiu-jitsu's also taught them patience. So now we're working together pretty well. So
you said your communication has really improved with them over the last year.
Communication's been great. Their whole attitudes have changed. Their willingness to always help now. Keep their little things, keep their roots clean, their character assignments.
That's awesome.
Eat their vegetables.
That's it, bro.
Fruits.
That's why we do it.
So I can't thank the experience enough. I can't thank you enough, just for everything.
It's been our pleasure, bro. It's great to have you here. It's awesome to see. Just like I know, jiu-jitsu can change your life. It can change anyone's life, and it's this like amazing opportunity that everyone walks in the door that they have a chance to run with. But not everyone does, or maybe it becomes a small portion of their life if that's what serves them, great. But you've bought into like the jiu-jitsu lifestyle of I'm going to use this as a vehicle to get better. I'm going to use this as a vehicle to help other people. And you've done that, and it's been cool to watch that transformation. And isn't it cool how just the more you're able to focus on the people around you, like you are the quintessential senior student. When the fundamentals class has got a new student, give them the Coach Dan. And you're the incredible ferryman for them that day. And the more you focus on other people's jiu-jitsu, especially when you get injured, just the better life gets. And the more you focus on other people in general, the more you focus on other people, the less you're going to suffer yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we're trying to do, is just find ways to alleviate suffering. But that's like the foolproof hack. Is that what being a parent has been?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, pretty much sums it up right there. I mean, just being a parent is just making sure that they find their way. And when they can't, you give them the tools or the money to get there.
Yeah, right.
But it's funny because we always talk about failing, and your willingness to fail that you need to in today's society. Failing is not looked at the way that we look at it.
Yeah.
But and it's weird because I'm going to be kind of contradictory here because being a parent, you don't want to see your children fail.
That's a hard dichotomy, man. That's tough.
And
but they need to fail.
Of course, and there's certain things that you can let it happen. As a parent, you can say, you know what, that's a life lesson.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna just let that fail. We're gonna let that go.
Yeah.
All right. You know, you failed that test. Don't worry about it. You know, now you know next time you got to study harder.
Yeah.
But when failure is really going to have an effect on them long term, that's when you have to be the parent. You have to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's where
you are a steward of their optimal failure.
Yes.
It's like, I want you to walk that fine line, like the Taoist symbol of yin and yang, like order and chaos. You're going to walk right on that fine line where you're going to fail often, but you're not always going to fail. You're just trying to keep them in that sweet spot.
Yes.
For the rest of their life.
But not to the point where they're overconfident.
Yeah.
Just like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be overconfident. You just want to just have that middle.
Yeah. And that's a good point, I guess, to kind of close out. We talk about, you ask, what's the perfect student? I want a perfect student who puts themselves in the opportunity to fail every day. Because once you get good at a few things, and maybe you're the most senior guy in the room, you can put yourself in a position where you're never going to fail. You're always going to win the round. But you're never going to get better. So, like, I want a student who's willing to, I'm really good at playing guard on my right hip. I'm going to spend a month playing on my left hip. And I'm going to get my guard passed by 2 stripe white belts. And that's okay. Because they are a dragon that represents a gold that I can acquire if I confront this obstacle. That's so important. I think that's why relationships like this get built in jiu-jitsu, because there's so many barriers to entry to be a really good jiu-jitsu student, that when you find one, you guys have so many aspects of your personality perfectly aligned, where it's like you build these relationships where we've known each other for a year,
Right.
which is crazy. I feel like I've known you for a lot longer.
Yeah.
Because we both came in with so many of the same character traits that jiu-jitsu kind of self-selects, people looking to aim up. And when you're trying to aim up, you talk about being a hero. If you're aiming up, you're a hero. If you're trying to improve your circumstances in any way, and then really if you're doing that in a way that improves the lives of people around you, like, you're a hero. That's it.
Good.
Good stuff, Coach Dan.
Yes, sir.
This was the second Mat Chat.
Okay.
I wonder how this is going to evolve and what it's going to become. But, dude, I enjoy it.
Okay, let's see who's next.
Yeah, actually, Matt Corrado is next.
Okay.
On Monday.
Okay,
Yeah, he has a laundry list of stuff he wants to talk about, so I'm excited. But, bro, it was a pleasure.
Very good. Thank you.
Enjoy your 9th class.
Thank you.
Record setting.
Try to get through it.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome.
Hero.
Plug it, Coach Dan.
Available on Amazon, ebook, and paperback. Get it today.
Great job. Thank you, bro.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Perfect timing. Coach Amber! How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm packed for a 14-hour day.
You're ready.
I'm serious.
Thank you, Coach Dan. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Trev will have it on YouTube in no time.
We hit stop.